Okay, I now call the Planning Committee meeting to order. Tonight's meeting has been held with members of the Planning Committee, members of the Executive Management Team, Deputy City Clerk, and City Clerk in the Council chambers. Members of the Senior Leadership Team and other staff are available to answer questions in person and via video conference. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, I will read out the titles associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of the Planning Committee may ask that an item be held so that it can be further discussed. If an item is not held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at Planning Committee, and the item will go forward to the June 6th City Council meeting for approval. Okay, the first item on the consent agenda is the zoning bylaw amendment for 108, 116, and 122 Harvey Road in Ward 6. See nobody holding it, that is approved. The next item is an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 290, 294, 298, and 302 Georgian Drive. See nobody's holding that, it is approved as well. The final item on the consent agenda is the 2021 Affordable Housing Monitoring Report and Affordable Housing Strategy Update.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Natalie Harris. Thank you. We have two public meetings this evening. Although registration to speak prior to the meeting was encouraged, if you have not yet registered and wish to speak, please email the cityclerks@barrie.ca. That's cityclerks@barrie.ca, or call 705-797-5353, and staff will send you the information required to participate. Tonight's applications were submitted by the developers and deemed complete under the Planning Act to proceed with the public meetings. The first public meeting is to review an application for a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Barrie Central Developments Inc. for the land located at 34, 36, 38, 40, 44, and 50 Bradford Streets, legally known as Part Lot 27, Concession 5, former Township of Vespra, City of Barrie, lots 21 to 23, and part lots 20 and 24 W, unregulated plan Robert Ross. The second public meeting is to review an application for a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Pine Mount Development Limited for the lands located at 129 Collier Street, legally known as lots 27, 28, and 29 of Dunlop Street Plan 2 and lots 37, 38, 39 Collier Street Plan 2. Members of the Planning Committee will be listening to the presentation and comments received during the public meeting, but will not be making comments or debating the item tonight. Members of the Planning Committee will have an opportunity to provide comments when the staff report is considered by Planning Committee at a later date. As the purpose of the public meeting is to provide the public with an opportunity to give comments on the subject application, the ward councillor will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and questions of clarification. This will allow them to ask questions on behalf of residents unable to attend the meeting. Other committee members, including myself, can ask questions of staff after the meeting. Questions will be noted by staff and the applicant. However, they will not be responded to at this meeting and will be addressed in the staff report presented at a later date. Michelle Banfield, Director of Development Services, will you please confirm that notification was conducted in accordance with the Planning Act for the public meeting?
Yes, Deputy Mayor Ward, it was.
Thank you. Our first public meeting, I will now call upon a representative from MHBC Planning Limited to provide a presentation concerning an application for the lands located at 34, 36, 38, 40, 44, and 50 Bradford Street in Ward 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll share my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Sure, and was it, I know the screen said Trevor Hawkins, is that who's speaking?
It is.
Okay, great.
Good evening, Trevor Hawkins from MHBC, and with me this evening is Joel Doherty from HIP Developments, also representing the owner, and also like to acknowledge the architects, Martin Simmons Architects, who've designed the wonderful looking building that's on the screen in front of council this evening. As you noted, the lands are located on Bradford Street, encompass a number of properties, including a portion of the former Red Story Field near the intersection of Bradford and Simcoe. And I'm joined, as I said, by Joel Doherty, and Joel and I are going to tag team a little bit on this presentation. And for the first couple of slides, Joel is going to present. So I'm just going to advance the slide and then ask that Joel join in.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, members of committee. I trust everyone can hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, on behalf of HIP and Barrie Central Developments, happy to be here tonight, and thank you for the opportunity. We've been at this site for a while. We've been very excited about it. As you recall, we had a proposal come forward a few years ago. We've since come back and really viewed the site as much more of a downtown urban site. So before we had a site that we viewed, not quite downtown, certainly not suburban, but a little bit lower rise. We've since watched what's happened in the Barrie market and revisited the site and come back with a great design. Hats off to Martin Simmons Architects for coming up with a much more intense development. Great design, looking at 2 towers, 26 and 30 stories with a shared podium along Bradford. What we see this is doing is really taking advantage of where we are, very walkable to downtown within 5-10 minutes to all the great shops and businesses down there. You've got GO Train very close by, bus routes, Barrie Transit Terminal. There's a lot in the area, and we really feel that the context of this will serve also as a transition between some of the other recently approved towers on the other side of Bradford, over 40 stories, over 30 stories, will serve as a nice transition between that and some of the lower mid-density sites off towards Eccles. Try and change. Thank you. So in terms of context, so we are talking about in the yellow down at the bottom of the site, it's a total 7-acre site. And again, so we're looking at about 630 units. 1 and 2 bedroom units in the 2 towers, again, with the shared parking podium. And what was really important to us here is having an active podium, having units all around the podium. So not just looking at a parking garage, but activating Bradford, activating the Simcoe extension, activating the rear of the site, and activating also the south side of the site. So we've got residential units, including those on Bradford, having that active pedestrian realm where there's actually some of the units that you can walk into the units. They'll also have rear access as well within the building. Having that, and as well having attention to architectural design, not just through the towers, but also through that podium with different textures. And also features to this will be the parquet, recognizing the ruins from Prince of Wales and having that incorporated into a parquet. That remains a part of our proposal here. And then another feature, certainly for the residents, will be the level 6 podium. It'll be a terrace with about a half-acre park for residents as well. So we're finding that a lot of people, certainly accentuated through the pandemic, want to get outside and want to enjoy the outside. And so people move into here to get their own private backyard on that terrace level. So that'll be a big feature of this site as well. So again, we'll have about 900 people moving into these buildings to support the local businesses, really activate this area. Active podiums, street frontage, all very important design considerations, parquets and green space. So I'll turn that back to Trevor, who can walk through the application. Thank you.
So this gives committee a little bit of a zoomed in view of the site plan. So we have the 2 towers situated on top of the podium with access at the signalized intersection of Bradford and Simcoe, and a right in, right out access directly onto Bradford. The retained school facade on the south side of the building, so full sun, with the parquet in behind and the ability to walk through the preserved entry into the school, into the park setting. The project has 630 units, as Joel noted. The intent is that there will be units wrapping around the podium all the way around, so that the parking is contained centrally within the structure. So the building masks the parking all the way around. And in total, there's going to be 491 parking spaces for the project. This is a rendering looking at the project from the opposite side of Bradford Street. So we see the defined podium with the tower clearly situated on top of the podium and recessed backwards. So the podium acts as your relationship directly to the pedestrian realm along Bradford Street. We have the retained school facade on the south side with the parquet in behind. So we have a street wall, a continuous street wall with active uses, residential uses, lobbies, as well as the parquet all the way along the frontage. And then we have narrow towers facing the street with eyes on the street from the balconies, different articulation with vertical and horizontal separation and a defined roof line. And then again, as Joel noted, on top of this podium, we'll see in the next image, there's a planned amenity space. So here's the view from the opposite side. We have the amenity space. We have units wrapping all the way around the podium, hiding the parking. We have the driveway entrance, which would be shared with the city off of the Simcoe and Bradford signalized intersection. And then we see the sort of angled roof line to create an attractive skyline with lots of glazing, lots of balcony opportunities and ways that the massing is clearly broken up from the base and then middle sections and then a defined roof line. In terms of the official plan, the lands are located in the urban growth center, which is, of course, one of the prime areas intended and planned to accommodate growth and intensification with a density target of 150 persons and jobs per hectare. Within the urban growth center, the lands are designated city center, and that designation permits a broad range of uses, including commercial and residential. Residential development at medium and high density is encouraged in order to increase the resident population in the downtown. And that was one of the key objectives of the project, was to bring people into the downtown so that we're supporting the local businesses and activating this area on a sort of 7-day timeframe rather than just during the work week. Council may recall that these lands were subject to a zoning bylaw amendment, of course, in 2019, approved in 2020. They are zoned C12 with a site-specific exception. That exception permitted a height of 70 meters. The original design had two towers, one on Bradford, one facing sort of north towards the city lands, and then a third building closer to Eccles and Perry. Commercial uses are permitted, but under the site-specific, they are not required. And parking is required at 1 space per unit for the residential and not for the commercial. The zoning bylaw amendment in front of committee this evening is to seek an increase in height for the two buildings that we saw earlier, to go from 70 meters to 86 for the building on the south side and to 101 meters or 30 stories for the building on the north side, and then to seek a site-specific parking rate of 0.78 spaces per unit. There is a holding provision on the site today, which requires a record of site condition. That record of site condition has been submitted and acknowledged by the province, so that was accomplished in 2021 and has been satisfied. The original project, of course, it had multiple buildings, parking structure as well, and so there was going to be a requirement to stage the construction of that development, and that's why that requirement was in. We don't expect that the same requirements will apply to this project, which is more focused in one area. However, that requirement exists and will have to be addressed. And then finally, the requirement for the community benefits contribution agreement, which we will work with staff to satisfy. Neighborhood open house was held on February 15th of this year. I've highlighted some of the comments. They're also captured in the planning justification report. There was general support for the new design, both in terms of its physical appearance, but also its situation on the site and how it more comprehensively addresses Bradford Street. There were questions about the phasing, as the site plan notes. This is phase 1, and the back portion of the site would be phase 2. So we discussed with the community at that meeting that the zoning that's in place today permits residential and commercial development on the entirety of the site, and that phase 2 would be advancing some point in the future, but the intent would be to locate the tallest buildings along Bradford Street and then use the depth of the site to work on transitioning as we get closer to the Eccles and Perry area in terms of the built form and massing. There was an express desire to create a pedestrian connection from the Eccles Perry area through the site to Bradford Street. So we've accommodated pedestrian movement in phase 1 and through the site plan process in phase 1. And then in phase 2, we'll look at ways to make sure those two phases are connected and they make a connection out to Eccles and Perry so that there can be movement from that neighborhood through down towards Bradford Street. There was an expressed opposition. There was an opposition back in 2019 and 2020 to the Simcoe Street extension from the neighborhood, and that same concern was expressed at the neighborhood meeting, and this design doesn't propose an extension. There were questions about whether the requested parking rate of 0.78 spaces per unit would apply to phase 2, and the intent is that it would apply across the entirety of the site. There was questions, or I would characterize it as a desire for a food store in the downtown area to serve not just this project, of course, but the existing community and those who will be moving into the new developments in the downtown. And there was question about affordable housing and the ability to provide more housing that offers price points that are more attainable for community members or those moving into Barrie, those who already live in Barrie who are looking for housing. And certainly this type of development offering 1 and 2 bedroom units in this location, and with some units not requiring the additional cost of a parking space. We see this as offering a housing choice and a different housing price for those who are looking to live in Barrie and particularly live in an area where they may not require the use of and the extra costs associated with a vehicle to conduct their day-to-day or to get to work or wherever they may need to get around the city. So in summary, the project is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It's intensifying an area that's planned for intensification, an area that has existing services, existing transit. It's very walkable, has access to the waterfront and many public amenities, conforms to the growth plan and helps the city achieve the density targets for the urban growth center, conforms to the city's official plan, which permits the development in this area. The proposed amendments to the bylaw are very scoped in nature, and they're appropriate for the lands and their situation and in their context. We believe the new design is urban focused. It addresses Bradford Street in its fullness from one side of the site to the other through the inclusion of the park, the retained school facade, and then the building with the tower and podium massing, and the particular attention to create pedestrian-oriented scale. The retention of the school facade and the incorporation of it into a public amenity is a positive attribute of the project. We felt the neighborhood meeting was positive and the comments were generally supportive of the project. And we feel that this is a key downtown site. It's large, it has great potential. And we think that this project realizes many of the goals and objectives of the community and of council in terms of bringing residents into downtown, creating an urban project within a very walkable neighborhood. So that concludes our presentation and thank the committee for their attention.
Okay, thank you. I will now call upon Celeste Cemetery, Senior Planner, to provide an update on the status of the application.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Ward and members of Planning Committee. Further to Mr. Hawkins' presentation and the memo provided to Planning Committee for reference, I will provide a brief update regarding the status of the application and the land use matters being considered by staff. The application is currently under review by planning staff, the city's technical review team, and external agencies such as LSRCA. As noted in the presentation, the general site design has changed from the previous specific provisions that were approved by council for design of the property. The primary review of this proposal has been based on the zoning standards of the central area commercial zone, with consideration given to the special provisions granted by SP 589. An analysis of the application will be provided at a later date when the staff report is brought forward to Planning Committee. The planning and land use matters being considered by staff include integration with the existing and proposed developments in the area, also including city projects, such as the daylighting of Kids Creek, the site of the former Fisher Auditorium, and the Bradford Street environmental assessment. Additional items under review include the treatment of the heritage facade of the Prince of Wales School, the availability of servicing, effective vehicular and pedestrian circulation, both on site and connected to the municipal sidewalks and the multimodal trail system, and the proposed phasing of the project, including but not limited to interim uses for the vacant lands on site. The recommendation for an amendment to the zoning bylaw is anticipated to come forward to Planning Committee in late 2022 or early 2023. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward and members of Planning Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions of clarification and to hear from members of the public. All of the submission materials and key dates associated with the development of this site are also available for viewing online on the city's proposed development page under Ward 2. Alternatively, you can contact me directly.
Thank you, Mr. Cemetery. If a person registers, well, first of all, I'll mention one more time that if you want to speak at the public meeting, you can call 705-797-5353. If a person registers to speak, if you are registered to speak for this public meeting, please use the raise your hand function or press number 9 on your phone to raise your hand, or press number 6 and press number 6 to unmute yourself. I will ask that once a member of the public has joined the virtual meeting to speak on the matter, please begin by stating your first and last name and your address for the record, and then proceed with your comments. We have one person registered for the speak of this meeting. I will now invite Kathy Colbatch to provide comments. Ms. Colbatch.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. And thank you. I came late to the presentation, but I did watch the neighborhood meeting this afternoon. So I do have, I think, a pretty good understanding. I just had a couple of comments, and if I understood correctly from the neighborhood meeting, and this may have changed, that you were talking about the total number of units being 623 or 630 and 900 people. Can somebody clarify that for me?
We don't get into back and forth, but they did say in the presentation there were 630 units.
Right. Okay. So, and during the neighborhood meeting, when I was watching, it talked about the potential for 900 people, which I think is not as many as what would be expected. Not a professional planner, obviously, but I just think that most units would have at least 2 people, not 1.5 people, or whatever the math is, to come up with 900 people. As well as the parking ratio. So in the first rezoning, the parking was a minimum of 1 unit per residence. And now you're looking at a reduction to 0.78, I believe, which is less parking. So my question is, if people, even though we want everyone to walk and ride your bicycle and take public transit, if we're putting in 630 units and we're only putting in 489 parking spots, and say everybody did have at least 1 car and some maybe 2, where is the overflow parking going to go? Because that's, you know, it's in my calculations, it's well over 130 parking spaces, at least, at the very least, that if there were more people with cars. And you know, as much as we like to say that we want people to walk and bike ride and take transit, Barrie just isn't, you know, not everything that you want will always be downtown. Even if we grow and we have more business come to the downtown core, not everything that you need. So people are going to need cars. So, you know, parking is a question. And then my third comment was when I looked at the reports online, I didn't see a shadow study report. So I'm guessing that the shadow study report is still to come, because during the original plans, I think they talked about there is shadowing from the buildings that are on Bradford Street where the hotel is going to be. So I imagine that there will be shadowing that falls to the Perry, Eccles, sort of the more historic area. And just wondering where the shadow study is. And I think those were mainly my comments. I was excited to see actually what was reimagined for facing Bradford Street. And I hope that care is taken with the cultural heritage portion, which is the Prince of Wales School facade. And it's unfortunate that it's sort of even decompensated since we probably were first starting looking at this. But overall, I think it looks like a good plan. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And your questions will be addressed in the staff report.
Thank you.
Ms. Cook, do we have anybody else? Okay, then I'll turn to the ward councillor. Councillor Elwin, do you have any questions of clarification?
Thank you, Acting Mayor, Deputy Ward, Deputy Mayor Ward, Acting Mayor as well, double title going on there. Okay, I do have a couple questions. I want to start off with a couple questions for Ms. Cemetery. Actually, I was curious about the shadow study as well. Is that a requirement for a development like this?
Ms. Cemetery?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin. My understanding was that it was submitted. I believe it's part of the urban design study, but I will definitely verify that and ensure that Ms. Colbatch is aware as well of where that is located. That's
great. Thank you. My second question is around the parquet at the former Prince of Wales site. And I'm wondering from the city's perspective, what we're going to be doing to ensure public access and a high quality public space. Is this going to be owned by the property owner, maintained by the property owner, or is it going to become an actual city park?
Councillor Owen, is that for the developer or for staff?
That was for staff if they have an answer, but I mean, if we need to pass it on to the developer too, that's fine.
Great. Okay. Ms. Cemetery?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin. At present, the current design of the property has the Prince of Wales School facade as part of a private amenity space that is belonging to the development.
Okay, so is there any opportunity for us as a city to work that into a site plan agreement to ensure public access to that not only historically important space, but I think also just an important green space in the area?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin, I can certainly take that back to the Parks Planning Group.
Okay, thank you. My next question is also for Ms. Cemetery, and it's around the provision of affordable housing. So our current official plan has a 10% goal. Our new official plan, a 15% requirement. What have we seen from this applicant in terms of demonstrating the provision of that 10% affordable housing?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin. It was, they have provided justification as part of their planning justification report. And certainly that is going to be reviewed by staff as well as in coordination with our new affordable housing strategy and any of the details that would be applicable through that process.
Okay. Another question for you, Ms. Cemetery, around the pedestrian and I guess active transportation access from Eccles Perry Street to Bradford Street. Are we going to be looking at site plan provisions to guarantee public access through the site and pedestrian and cycling circulation through the site?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin. That is part of the city's discussion. It does involve a number of groups, including planning as well as parks planning and our transportation planning staff. That is being investigated, and we will determine the best methodology for that moving forward through the design review. Okay,
and my final question for you, Ms. Cemetery, is around, I know a lot of residents have asked me about the chimney where the chimney swifts reside. There's a habitat there. What is the status of the work to relocate the chimney?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin. I'm not directly involved with the Chimney Swift project. However, my understanding is that the habitat is going to be moved to Sunnydale Park during the time frame when it is appropriate to do so.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to ask a few questions of the applicant. So my first question is around the tenure of the building. So if I recall correctly, the previous application, it was a rental rental apartments that were being proposed. Is that what's being proposed with this application?
Mr. Hawkins?
I think Mr. Doherty has jumped in, and I believe he wants to answer the question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. Yeah, our core business is either purpose-built rental apartment buildings or condominiums, and we've not made that determination just yet on this site. We evaluate, sort of cost structure, market needs, market demand. Our review so far in the Barrie market is that both are definitely needed. I think we can probably all agree that all housing stock is needed in Barrie. So either way, we will continue to evaluate.
Okay, and following up on that, I'd like to ask you about the 10% goal of affordable units within our current official plan, and what you plan to do to demonstrate that you've met that goal.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I mean, we review affordable policies, review affordability, review pricing all the time. I think what's important to note here is all areas of the spectrum of housing are needed, whether it's single family houses, townhouses, condominiums, rental apartment, affordable housing. They're all needed. We all collectively need to get supply to the market, and pricing has gone up. Everyone's aware of how pricing's gone over the number of years. Costs have gone up that and then some. So margins have not grown in the marketplace. So it's always something we look at, and we want to be as affordable as we can in the marketplace. What we find is that, if, as an example in Waterloo, where housing could be $1.1 million, $1.4 million, townhouses 950,000. Our condos would slot in, half of that of the price of a single detached house. So for a 2-bedroom condo to get a young family in there with a young child, it's important to try and hit that market, and we find there is strong demand in that market sector, and to try and meet that need. So to look at affordability, to answer your question on, I think what your market stats would be, we're happy to engage in discussions with staff, but it has to be in collaboration with either incentives or with cities, federal, provincial governments. And we're happy to be part of those discussions, that solution. But costs are a lot, and we want to make sure these projects go forward and we get supply to the market. Thank you. Okay,
and I want to turn to the activation of the street along Bradford. So as of right now, there's no proposed commercial space along the first floor along Bradford. Is that correct?
I can take this one, Joel. So we recognize that it's an objective of the OP and certainly the zoning bylaw to create commercial along the main streets such as Bradford. So this project has created space. So we've basically allocated space in the ground floor to create commercial units. Yeah.
Okay. And building off of that, I think the Prince of Wales facade parquet is going to be a key piece of activating the streetscape along Bradford there. What plans do you have to make that a high quality public space that invites people in and doesn't just become a dead space behind a facade?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we view this as a key component of the project, both for the people who will live in the new building, but also for the community. So I don't know if you recall the previous design, we advanced through the last approval process. We got fairly far into design through the site plan process, retaining well-renowned landscape architects. It was a very appealing and attractive space, and it's intended to be a very the kind of space that you want to go to, not the kind of space that you want to avoid. And that's going to be our goal and objective this time around as well.
Okay, so the plan is to keep it fairly consistent with the previous application?
It's been shifted. I think one of the pros of the new design is that it's south of the building now, rather than before. It was between a couple of buildings and was more constrained in terms of the amount of sunlight it would get, whereas now I feel that it will have a lot more sunlight, a lot more visibility, which I think will be a positive change in the design potential.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. If anybody has any written comments, you're asked, first of all, should we just one quick check? Anybody else registered? Madam Clerk?
No, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has any written comments, you're asked to submit them to Celeste Kitsimetry, Senior Planner in the Development Service Department at celeste.kitsimetry, that's KITSEMETRY at barrie.ca. We'll now move on to our second public meeting. A reminder, if members of the public have not yet registered and wish to speak, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 705-797-5353 and staff will send you all the information you need to participate. We'll now call upon a representative from Pine Mount Developments Limited to provide the presentation concerning an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for the lands located at 129 Collier Street.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Hi. Thank you, everyone. My name is Mark Tim. I'm the development manager with Pine Mount Developments. Thank you for your time today. I believe we have Eldon Theodore who will be presenting the application to the committee today from MHBC.
Okay, go ahead. I assume you'll be sharing your screen with us.
Yes, I believe Eldon will be sharing a screen shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Eldon Theodore from MHBC. This is the second time this has happened where I was supposed to be presenting and someone else showed up at this committee. So it's a pleasure to be back. I'm going to share my screen on the presentation.
We can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. So as I mentioned, my name is Eldon Theodore. I'm a partner with MHBC. I'm the planner assisting Pine Mount Developments Inc. on this application. The proposal before you tonight is for a 12-story building in the form of 2 towers atop a 3- and 4-story podium at 129 Collier Street. And as you are fully aware, Mark Sim from Pine Mount Developments is also here tonight should there be any technical questions that I'm not able to answer. So for a bit of background, the subject lands are located south Collier Street East, north of Dunlop Street East, located east, a couple properties east of Point Street. It's approximately 0.61 hectares in size, currently vacant. It has frontage on both streets, so it represents a through lot opportunity, and the property slopes downward as you move from Collier to Dunlop as you move closer to the bay and the lake. The property is designated city center and it's zoned transitional center commercial C21 zone, which I'll go into within the next slides. So the official plan designates the subject lands on the left as city center and in the center as commercial planning area, both of which permit a broad range of uses, including residential in a variety of housing forms, and particularly medium and high density building forms are encouraged in the city center. Subject lands are also in a height review study area, simply meaning that additional evaluation of height and density from a block planning perspective is necessary, and that has been considered and included as part of our submission of our application to the city. Subject lands are also within an urban growth center, a location where growth is to be focused through intensification in a compact urban form. All of this is to confirm that the downtown, the city center, is an appropriate location for greater height and density in a compact form to meet the city's growth objectives. As I mentioned previously, the property is zoned transitional center commercial C2-1. That permits a broad range of uses, and that includes apartment buildings to a height of 30 meters. The proposal is to retain the existing zoning category, the C2-1, but to request modifications to a number of specific provisions, which I'll go into a little bit later. So the proposal for you tonight is for 2 towers, a 12-story residential building, the north tower being 42.1 meters, and the north tower is shown here in the image here. This is the view from Collier Street, and the south tower 43.5 meters. There will be 293 residential units with 249 parking spaces, of which 235 will be residential and 14 will be visitor. There will be 146 long-term bicycle parking spaces and 30 visitor bicycle parking spaces. And just looking at the view here, from a design perspective, the proposal seeks to provide a strong base in terms of materials, such as a brick finish, as part of the podium to help anchor the building. And as you move up, a lighter materiality is proposed, using glass as well as metal cladding that have a lighter composition within the skyline. This is to help minimize the perception of massing. There's also an opportunity within the east and west facades along the podium to introduce murals or public art along those facades where the blank wall conditions exist. And this is something that we hope to explore through the approval process with city staff. And this is just a view on the left to the north, showing the elevation from Collier Street, and to the south showing the elevation from Dunlop. And you can see that strong base perception, that red brick that is synonymous with many homes within the area. And then as you move up, moving to that lighter, that built form, and even at the elevation to the south, the tower in itself is inset within the podium to give the impression that it's almost tucked into it. We've also considered the block in itself that the subject lands are within, evaluating how the proposal fits within the existing as well as the emerging context. And the proposal does introduce a high level of entrances and active windows along both Collier Street as well as Dunlop Street. Mid-block connections have been contemplated as shown in the blue from a pedestrian level to provide for access through the site. Vehicular connections are going to be limited, helping to minimize the amount of curb cuts that occur from this property. So having only an access off of Collier Street, that will help to control movement and allow for a more positive relationship in terms of built form along the public realm, having continuous street frontage and active frontage opportunities. And as you see on the right here, all loading is managed internally as well as parking. Loading and parking ramps are internal to the building, and all parking is within underground or within partial portions of the podium. And the podium itself does not exhibit or show from the street any parking, as they are flanked by residential units. And just a bit more detail as it relates to the ground level. Efforts have been made to achieve ground floor animation through active uses, and that includes, as you can see here, the majority of facades having either residential units or residential access to the main building through lobbies or amenity spaces to service those areas, and that's in yellow, blue, and burgundy there. And the service areas are mainly, for the most part, relegated to smaller portions of street facades and mainly internal to the site. In terms of the requested amendments that we're seeking, the proposal is to seek a reduction in the side yard setbacks, 1.2 meters at the easterly side yard setback and 8.1 meters from the westerly side yard setback, 1.2 meters, and easterly side yard setback of 8.1 meters. A building height of 43.5 meters, providing 0% commercial coverage, and looking at a minimum parking width of 2.6 meters, and a minimum width of a drive aisle of 6 meters. And lastly, a minimum parking rate of 0.85 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And to just go to a bit of a rationale on some of these requests that we're making, in terms of the setbacks, the proposed building, in particular the podium, as you see on the left here, maintains appropriate setbacks from the adjacent active uses that exist today. And that includes, when you look to the west, the existing commercial uses, the restaurant, the dental facilities. To the east, a more ample and larger setback adjacent to existing residential properties, taking consideration those existing operations. The proposal also achieves what I view as a superior setback as it relates to tower separation. Typical tower separation you see is 25 and sometimes some cases 30. This is seeking a 32-meter separation between towers. That really helps to mitigate potential shadows, mitigate overlook and protection for privacy between towers themselves, and just helping to create a less crowded built form on the property. And the proposed height, as you see on the right here, is really just slightly higher in terms of the relationship to the streets as you go down the changing grades on this site. So from Collier Street, what we're seeking really is 2 additional stories. And from Dunlop Street, we're seeking an additional 4 stories. But particularly along Collier, the building facade actually steps back at the top 2 floors to further reduce that perception of height and providing a height relationship that it's actually quite similar to what the bylaw permits today, given that frontage, and we view that frontage as more sensitive as it relates to what's located to the north in terms of existing residential and other mixed uses in that area. Just from a context perspective, we see this proposal as fitting into the range of tall buildings that exist and are emerging within the existing and area context, having a built form that transitions in terms of tall to mid-rise when they're thinking about heights, moving down into the neighborhood itself. And we've looked at other applications proposed and under construction within the growth center, and we see this application as being really in line with other proposed tall buildings that are under construction, and in quite the height in itself is actually quite modest when you look at some of these applications being sought, but an appropriate height when you think about its location being close to the edge of the growth center. So really forming a transitional height as it relates to the surrounding context. And just to the east, and recognizing that we've requested 0 commercial coverage, this is in recognition to the fact that the subject lands, again, are at the edge of the growth center in a transition location from the downtown, the
Mr. Theodore? Just give him a minute here if we can see him getting back on. Mr. Sim, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, would it be best for us to wait for Mr. Theodore, or should we continue with the presentation as is?
You have a way to reach him to me?
Yeah,
I'm sure
I'll give him a call right now. Please bear with me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your patience and everyone's patience today. Eldon is having technical difficulties, unfortunately. This is the reality of Zoom meetings today. But he said he would need a few minutes and he'll hop back on.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
My apologies. I think the power went
Okay.
out. So I am hotspotting.
Okay, we can hear you, and you were on slide 12, I believe, just talking about proposed developments.
Okay, thank you. And that's actually my last slide. So just to conclude, my client has been working with city staff since 2009 to bring forward this proposal. We think is great. It's a great opportunity to provide for 293 residential units. The proposal that we have is still maintaining the core of the zoning on the site. We believe this development complements growth and change that is happening within the downtown, and looking at contributing to a range of housing types as well as costs that are not really readily available within downtown itself. And we received feedback from the community meeting and a lot of positive feedback and a lot of constructive comments that we've taken back to the process, and look forward to working with staff and with the community as we move forward on this application. And I'm happy to answer, myself and my client are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, glad you were able to rejoin us. I will now call upon Michelle Banfield, Director of Development Services, to provide an update on the status of this application.
Thank you for the introduction, Deputy Mayor Ward, and good evening to everybody. So planning staff are completing the technical review of this application. So a neighborhood meeting was held back in February of this year with approximately 37 residents, along with the Ward 2 Councillor, Councillor Aylwin, planning staff, the applicant, and the applicant's consultants. And the applicant has actually engaged with the community, quite frequently, even outside of our meetings, to trying to address some of the matters raised by the residents. So architectural design is always important in our existing neighborhoods, in particular, the pedestrian scale and experience, street activation, and just really making sure the height and density gets integrated into the neighborhood. Active ground floor uses and streetscape design was raised, affordable housing units, a reference to the need for a mix of housing units sizes, as well as looking at traffic impacts, parking, and any sort of active transportation connections. So staff are currently reviewing the application, not only city staff, but our internal and external agency partners. And we are reviewing the application as it relates to compatibility with the surrounding land uses, ensuring that the proposed built form, site layout, and overall design contributes to an active streetscape. With all infill projects, we take a look at, whether the project is efficiently using land and resources. Always look at, in particular on a through lot project like this, connectivity between the subject lands and anything that's existing and planned around them. Traffic and parking is always taken a look at, as well as looking at the proposed density to make sure it's appropriate for the site, as well as the appropriateness of the requested special provisions. So everything that I've said here, and the comments that we receive, everything that we've heard either through the neighborhood meeting or what we might hear this evening, all of those comments will be brought back and addressed in the detailed planning staff report. So as we do some of those, hear for some of those comments and get some of that feedback, they may require revisions to the plans, reports and studies. And if that's the case, they will be updated. Staff will bring back a recommendation to planning committee with respect to the zoning amendment, most likely in the fall of 2022. And prior to wrapping up, I just wanted to remind everybody that all of the details are available on the city's proposed development webpage. This is under Ward 2, and the key dates and reports and studies and plans are all there. And the file manager is Jordan Lambie, and people can always reach out and contact him directly. Thanks very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Banfield. Ms. Cook, do we have anybody registered to speak?
Yes, we have a Christine Inglis registered to speak, and that's the only speaker registered.
Okay, I'll just, if you are registered to speak, please use either raise your hand function or press number 9 on your phone to raise your hand, or press number 6 to unmute yourself. I'll ask that once a member of the public has joined the virtual meeting to speak on the matter, please begin by stating your first and last name and your address for the record, and then proceed with your comments. So I will now invite a member of the public to speak.
Hi, my name is Christy Ingalls. I am the owner of the business directly adjacent to the proposed site. My business address is 137 Collier.
Okay, proceed.
Thank you. I mean, starting out, I'd just like to say I love a lot of things about this project. After operating a business beside a vacant lot in the downtown core for the past 8 years, I look forward to having not an empty lot of multiple phone calls to the city and such. So I look forward to residential. I think the building looks great. I have very few concerns about it. My first question, I suppose, is the interruption of business access. My driveway is small and narrow, and there's going to be a large retaining wall right beside. And I'm just wondering what the plan is. Am I going to have any interruption? I haven't had any communication about that so far. I just want to know if the developers have any concerns or plan that they can fill me in on with respect to that.
Okay, we don't actually get into back and forth here, but your questions will be answered. Either they'll reach out directly to answer them, or they will be answered in the staff report.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. The other main concern I have was the one bylaw amendment with respect to the parking. So in the past 8 years that I've owned the property, I bought the building for business purposes because it has that commercial zoning, and I operate a chiropractic clinic. There's myself and 4 other practitioners that operate our individual businesses out of my building. When I bought the building, there was free parking on the same side as my address. There was permit parking on the opposite side, and there was free parking, on-street parking, all the way up the hill on Bursey, just around the corner from the post office there, if you're familiar with it. In the past 8 years, all of that free parking and all the free parking all the way down Eugenia behind the courthouse, that is no longer. So it's either no parking or it's no parking Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. So that was our backup plan. If needing, we could park a few blocks away and walk as the business operators. That's no longer an option. Then our second backup plan for increased parking was to purchase an on-street parking pass through the city and park on the opposite side and leave the free parking on my property available for patients and clients. That is no longer an option. And now the free parking that was on the same side of the office, it went from free 2-hour parking, and then it changed to free 3-hour parking. And now it is metered paid parking only. So in the 8 years that I've been operating my small business, I mean, the pandemic's been hard enough, but we've survived. I'm very, very concerned about a reduction in parking. I'm afraid that I will no longer be able to rent out the small offices I have on site, because I can't offer an office to somebody if I can't offer them a parking spot. So without the option of purchasing a parking pass and without free on-street parking, even for half the day, my business capacity has already been severely reduced in the past 8 years. So my only hesitation with the bylaw amendments that the developer is asking for is a reduction in parking. I think the bylaw is important to maintain that one per dwelling. And I think that it's a reasonable concern to say that it is going to severely affect my business and the longevity of my business in that location. I intend on practicing for another 15 years if my body allows it. And if the parking pushes me out and puts me out of business, I can't afford any other building in Barrie as a sole proprietor. You know what prices are at. I was lucky to get that building at a good time, and I don't need any other hurdles. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Cook, is there anybody else?
No, Deputy Mayor Ward, there is not.
Okay, once again, I'll just remind people, if they do have comments, to email city clerks. If they want to get on tonight, email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 705-797-5353. But I'll turn to Councillor Elwin, the ward councillor, for questions of clarification.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor Ward. My first question is for the applicant, and if you didn't see this question coming, you haven't been paying attention. We have a 10% goal in our official plan around affordable units in all new developments. I did see that the proposal is to have a rental, purpose-built rental with reduced unit rates in some instances. Will you be meeting that goal of 10% affordable based on the city's definition?
So through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to you, Councillor Elwin, thanks for the question. At this time, my client has proposed a plan that includes units that are what you would classify as more attainable than what is currently available within the downtown in the similar housing typology bracket. And they've done their research to understand what's available, and they're trying to reach a market price. Whether that meets and hits the threshold of affordable housing, that's something that we're evaluating and looking at through the process. We're acutely aware of Council's recent approval of the official plan and increasing that number to 15%. The objective of this project has always been to provide for something that is more affordable and more attainable. And we'll continue to work for that aspiration through that process and with your staff.
Okay, thank you. And I want to follow up on a question that Ms. Ingalls asked around the construction and access. Do you currently have a construction phasing plan in place, or anything you can share with us on that?
I can tell you that at this stage that we don't have a construction phasing plan. I know that any construction that we'd have to do, particularly through the site plan process, we would be required to undertake a construction management plan, and that will include matters such as crane swing, such as ingress and egress, where we're putting up, if we're putting up any hoarding, how we're doing shoring, and particularly if we have to encroach on anybody's property, undertaking and getting approval from those adjacent landowners. So I think the first mark of development would be ensuring that the development that we do is contained within the site. But if it has to go offsite, which I think Ms. Inglis indicated concern about impact on her property and her parking, that would be only with her consent. So the objective is to not impact anything on her business and mitigate any offsite impacts as relates to development, which is in the spirit of the construction management plan.
That's great. Thank you. That's it for me for now. And I'll follow up offline with our staff around the parking question that Ms. Ingalls had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. One last check. Ms. Cook, anybody?
No, Deputy Mayor Ward, there are no further speakers.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for their comments. And if anybody has any further written comments, you are asked to submit them to Jordan Lambie Senior Urban Design Planner in the Development Services Department at jordan.lambie@berry.ca. That wraps up our public meetings. We'll now turn to the only item that was held from the consent agenda. That was held by Councillor Natalie Harris. Would you like to put it on? It's the Affordable Housing Monitoring Report. Would you like to put that item on the floor, Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I would definitely like to put that on the floor. And I've had some conversations. I was going to bring a motion forward, but I think maybe I'll just open the dialogue a little bit more to expand through Ms. Banfield what kind of strategies are going to be used for the update. I know that there's some money already set aside to make sure that we're on task with the needs for the city for affordable housing. And I just wanted to know kind of what ideas were going to be explored and make sure the thinking happens obviously prior to the update. So what can you tell us about that?
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Harris. So, there has been a lot of work done recently on affordable housing. So we do have the task force recommendations to work through, as well as part of the submission materials this evening was basically that report card on the old strategy. So there's some areas in that existing strategy, not so much old, it's not that old, that existing strategy that are still working or that we still want to build on. But the whole framework of affordable housing really has changed really since the strategy started. So, we will be looking to look at all the new ideas that are out there for housing affordability and affordable housing. And that'll include things like going to the experts, best case scenarios, best practices, those sorts of things. And that'll all form part of the start to the update to the strategy. And so that's going to build on not only what our local experts have told us through the task force, but just also what's happening in the realm of affordable housing.
That's music to my ears. Perfect. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I just had a couple of questions for staff on the report. But first, I want to say thank you to Ms. White and Ms. Banfield for their work on this. It's been great to see the focus on this topic. My first question is around the reporting on the strategy and the number of units. I'm puzzled why we keep reporting the second suite numbers as affordable units when we acknowledge ourselves that they are likely not affordable. Is there an opportunity for us to just stop doing that and be more upfront about those numbers?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin. Well, I think staff are really trying to be very upfront about the numbers. Otherwise, we would have just said, hey, yay, we did them all. We're done. Our work is done. So ultimately, because we do work very closely with the County of Simcoe, we keep our data collection and our data reporting consistent with theirs. So as you know, the second suite discount rate, if you will, the amount that we assume of new units, unfunded ones, are affordable has changed over the years. So when the county looks at changing that, we look at changing that. And so really, that's why we do report the two numbers. We do show, this is what, for keeping our data exactly apples to apples, the way the county is calculating it. These are our numbers. But we really do recognize what you've just said. And that's why we do report the second number. And we do try to make it, as I said, as transparent as possible. And, as we look to update the strategy, I think we are going to be looking at updating those metrics and updating how we do that. And so that I think will come through the update to the strategy.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that question. I do really appreciate the effort to be upfront and transparent with the numbers. So thank you for that. My next question is on inclusionary zoning and major transit station areas. Is there any work anticipated on the horizon for us to designate either of our major transit station areas as protected transit station areas, and so that we can do inclusionary zoning? Is there any work on that being undertaken soon?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin, absolutely that it hasn't necessarily started yet, but it is very much the inclusionary zoning and the MTSA. The new official plan really sets up that foundation for sure, and that is something that staff definitely are looking at bringing forward.
Okay, and I wanted to also ask about on page 11 of the report card. And by the way, I love the report card format. I think it's a really digestible way of looking at this information and the steps that we've taken to address this crisis. So page 11, there's mention of the demolition and conversion of residential rental properties and the potential for a bylaw to protect more of our existing affordable housing supply, and that the work hasn't been initiated. Is there any support that staff need from council to initiate that work? I do see that as an important piece of a strategy, protecting our existing affordable stock.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin, there is not anything that we need from council on this. To be honest, when you do look into the affordable housing realm, that kind of term of like renovictions you hear a lot about, and so some of those conversion and demolition bylaws really tie more into those types of scenarios that we haven't really seen too much yet in the city of Barrie. So it is definitely obviously on the report card something that we want to improve and bring that forward to council, but we don't need anything in terms of obviously until we bring something to council, then your support for that. But at this point, staff are okay with the work program for sure.
Okay, thank you. And building off of that, do we collect data or track when we do lose affordable units in the city? Do we have a way of doing that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin, I don't believe we do track. We have actually it's even a challenge trying to find the affordable units in the first place. And so, the housing affordability, we ask for it, that kind of information in affordable housing reports. But it's when justification for new applications come in, obviously if there's a site there, what's existing and are you going to be losing units there? But it's inconsistent data that we have.
Okay. I'd be interested to learn a bit more about that because I really have no idea, like if we have lost affordable units over the last couple of years or not. My last question, and I realize this is sort of one of those areas where with the county as service manager, it's a tricky spot for us to be directly involved in. But I couldn't help noticing that rent supplements as a mode of getting people into units. There were only, I believe it was 19 households who had accessed that type of support over the year of this report. Do we feel like there's an opportunity for us to have a dialogue with the county on increasing that program or increasing access to that program or funding for that program?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Aylwin, staff have had contact and conversations with the county about this because it is a great program and it's a combination, obviously, of landlords and making their spaces available for that program, as well as getting provincial funding to gap that difference. But staff have definitely taken a look at that with county council, but we can continue those conversations for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are all my questions. And I do just want to say we have so much more work to do on affordable housing. And I think this report importantly highlights the need for more deeply affordable units through social housing, which is the responsibility of the county. But I think we hear from the county that we need more significant capital funding from higher levels of government who have the funding power to do so. So I'm hoping that we can continue to push for more of those social housing units that we so desperately need. But thanks again to staff for this report, and let's keep working on it.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. I have a question for Ms. Banfield, I think. And first of all, I wanted to say, you know, it's a great report. You've made a really dry and difficult subject readable, and that's very helpful for someone like me. I think it's also very discouraging to me when I read, even just reading the summary that you have in the last 3 paragraphs of the report, and you say ownership cost is up 30%, rental vacancy is really low. We have no means of keeping rental rates affordable, and we need to relook at our strategy. And all of that, you know, is just kind of discouraging when you think that in our CIP program in the last year, we put $420,000 into it, and it looks to me like we didn't get very much as a result. And so I certainly understand what the situation is, because in Ward 1 we have quite a few second suites and we have quite a few accessory suites, and not a one is anywhere near affordable. So all of the work we did on getting those things added to our zoning bylaw have been for naught. And I guess when I look at our new official plan, and we're going for 15% this time, we're not making 10, we're probably not even making 1 at this point, but we're going to go for 10. But I'm very encouraged actually by the suggestion that we move to a cash in lieu program. And I'm just wondering, and I'm getting to a question, I promise you. I'm just wondering when we're going to see a cash in lieu program that we can consider here.
Ms. Banfield, maybe in your answer, you can also explain the cash in lieu program, because maybe I'm not the only one that found it a little confusing.
All right, you can do both.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Rietma. So first off, I do want to just flag that for the affordable housing report, we only count turnkey, right? So a unit that's people can walk into and can actually live in. Whereas the CIP, it is a little bit kind of down the pipe. And I was actually talking earlier to a council member that, you know, I know we have, you know, a project that got CIP money, got CMHC funding, it's under construction. They're aiming for occupancy in September. And I was talking to the project manager saying, yay, because I want to count your units. So I do know that there are some certainly coming. So I just, as I said, just wanted to really kind of flag that. In terms of the cash in lieu of affordable housing concept, there is some reference to it in the staff report of that is for sure something that council or staff have on their radar. I'm looking at Shelby because it will be Ms. White doing it for this year. So you will see something come back. Now, in terms of kind of what that program looks like, you know, there's a couple of options there. It could be something that is presented to council like a flat fee per unit, similar to cash in lieu of parkland. It could be something that is so that basically every unit pays it if the proposal doesn't have any. There's some options to look at the difference. So if they're renting or selling it at 500 and 300 is the affordable rent, is there's that kind of difference and they pay that per unit. There's just different ways. And as I said, staff will take a look at all of that and we'll present that to council with a recommendation on the best way to tackle that.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that report. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rietma. Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. Yeah, another question came to mind. Ms. Banfield, what kind of, I know we were looking at one point for city property, vacant lands, and how we could maybe make that possible for affordable housing. Had some struggles maybe finding those possible sites. What kind of conversations are happening or can they happen around using existing city lands? I know we kind of chatted briefly a while back about facilities might not be where we can do that, but what kind of options beyond just a vacant property is there possible with city land?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Harris. So there was previous direction given to staff to look at vacant city properties, and I don't believe that for many reasons there was really anything suitable. I know a different thing came back to council at different times. I do know that in other municipalities looking at using city properties like arenas and libraries and community centers, if there are extra bits of space that aren't parkland or what have you. Some municipalities across Canada have looked at some of those kind of co-location, I guess, if you will. So I know that's definitely out there in some municipalities. It's not something that we've looked at specifically ourselves yet, but we certainly could have those conversations with the broader city staff team. It wouldn't obviously just be development services, facilities, parks, Parks and Rec. There'd be a whole bunch of people that would be interested in that kind of a conversation, but we can certainly have it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to hear what you find out with that. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, see no other questions. I just had one, and it's there's no mention anywhere in the report about boarding houses, rooming houses, and I think they do play a role in at least getting people off the street if they're maybe not glamorous and not a long-term solution, but they certainly play a role. And I'm wondering whether we ever track the number of rooming house or boarding house beds that we have in Barrie at any one time, and if they're increasing, decreasing, that kind of thing. And I guess philosophically, why aren't they included in these kind of reports?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, or to you, Deputy Mayor Ward. So boarding, lodging, room and houses, we do, and I don't know there, I'm looking at Ms. Cook if she wants to chime in. We do license, the city does license them. Do you want to say anything?
Thank you. Yeah, we do license them. I'm not sure off the top of my head how many we currently have licensed, but I certainly can get that information to members of council.
And then back to your main question about, why it's not in there. I mean, at this point, we are reporting on kind of the current strategy, which didn't really reflect that type of housing. And so again, that is something that we can take away as staff to look at including in the updated strategy.
Thanks. I'd especially like to know the numbers. I mean, I'd like to know whether the numbers are decreasing, increasing, or staying the same in Barrie. I think because it does provide a very valuable, if unglamorous, service. Thanks. Seeing no other questions, that wraps up the items on the agenda, except for inquiries. We are now on inquiries. Are there any inquiries from members of Planning Committee on planning matters?
You have to vote.
Oh, we haven't voted. That's right. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Okay, the motion's on the floor. All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Now we're wrapped up. And now on inquiries. Are there any inquiries for planning staff? Councillor Congo.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Barry Ward. I had an inquiry. I didn't really fit into the previous conversation, so I didn't want to convolute the motion. But my question is about short-term rentals. And I have been hearing through a lot of respective municipality conversations that this is a hot topic. It has led to some residents reaching out and asking about short-term rentals in the city, perhaps some assumptions being made about when they're just individuals renting, whether or not they're short-term or they're just individuals that might be new to the neighborhood, or if they're seeing some turnover. Or so I think there's an interesting conversation there, and I didn't know how Barrie compares to other municipalities. I'm not hearing that this has been a pressure point for us in the city. And I didn't know if there were complaints that we were seeing coming in specific to short-term rentals, if you could speak to that. But my assumption is we're not seeing the same situations that I'm hearing about in neighboring municipalities with changes to bylaws and or addressing resident concerns specific to short-term rentals. And in your response, because you'll probably do this more accurately than I would speak to it, for those watching this evening, if you could speak to the difference to short-term rentals, because Airbnb comes to mind for me on that.
It's Benfield.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Kungle. So exactly, there are certainly, it is a hot topic in our area municipalities, and we have been keeping a look on it from the city's perspective. And so zoning enforcement is my team, and so certainly over the last, however many in known memory, I guess, we haven't had complaints related to short-term rental. And then the other enforcement piece potentially would be covered with Ms. Cook. And I don't know if Ms. Cook would want to chime in.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Kungle. I'm not aware of any complaints that we have received recently on short-term rentals. I would have to check with staff on that. We did have one issue a couple of years ago that got escalated and we dealt with it. It was more of a property because of a property standards issue, not necessarily being a short-term rental. But I certainly can check with staff to see and get the number if we have received any complaints.
That's helpful. Thank you. Just to make sure I was giving residents the right kind of feedback on that. And in general, if someone has concerns, I'm assuming it would just be the natural process to be contacting the city, be it to a service berry as an example, and then they can escalate that to the appropriate department if there's any concerns about what they're seeing in the neighborhood. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other inquiries? Seeing none. Welcome, Councillor Harris. The meeting's adjourned.
Good night.